Hey there, designers. Welcome to the Huddle, where we dive deep into the world of UX and help you take your skills to the next level. I'm Meg.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Cam, and we are your hosts.
Today, we're going to be diving into boot camps, the good, the bad, the ugly, how you can prepare. For full disclosure, this was all of our journey. We all graduated from Brain Station Boot Camp in December of 2022. So we'll be sharing you our experience on that. But before we dive into that, there are a few other different journeys that you could take on your UX journey. So, Cam, would you like to break us down some of those different ways that our emerging designers could take on their path?
Yeah. So three of us started this process in 2022. That is somewhere, it's very recent. UX design is something that we maybe need to backtrack a little bit and maybe talk about. Our perspective is UX design has always existed, but it's been a formalized role within organizations for product design in the last, we'll say, 20 years, but it's something that's been emphasized and formalized in its education in the last 5 to 10. So we're going to do a whole episode about the history of UX as we see it. So we're not going to get too off track with this. My personal experience was coming from a long history outside of tech, outside of corporate kind of options for jobs. And I had two friends in my network that both are UX designers in their kind of like senior roles. They're 5 and 7 years experience. So those two designers pivoted from a graphic design background and an industrial design background. So they didn't do a formal educational experience to gain their skills as UX designers. They took design experience and reapplied that to UX, one of which was pivoting within an existing team, and the other person did their research and developed a portfolio and applied for a UX role. So self-taught is what I'm getting at. And that is totally an option still in 2022. It's something that I considered, and we'll get into the pros and cons of those, many options compared to boot camps. And then there is a third option of boot camps, self-taught, and then a 4-year undergrad program. UX is one name that you will hear as kind of like that's the title that you'll be going for generally, and there's many under that umbrella of UX design. Different organizations and different educational structures will call that something different. I had a friend that went for communication, and basically that's more or less what he was studying, and it just wasn't formalized at the time. And I think that was 5-10 years ago. And I believe it was George Brown. I could be wrong, but many programs have a ton of crossover into UX, and that is why so many people can leverage their previous experience and kind of reapply that design thinking and problem solving and just dealing with people. So I'll pass it over to Meg and Mel for kind of like the pros and cons of these different avenues and different ways to get into UX. Meg, what do you feel about like the self-taught method? Did you consider that when you were making your decision?
Totally. So I think personally, I know myself to be incredibly driven, particularly when given structure at the beginning of my learning journey. Full disclosure, have ADHD. So for me, structured learning, where I have regimented deadlines and understandable metrics of success, works incredibly well for my academic brain.
She loves a rubric.
I do love clear expectations. I mean, how else are you supposed to be successful without clear expectations on what success means? That being said, I think that self-learning is something that we all do no matter what background we come from. I think it would be foolish to take any academic path without supplementing it with your own self-learning.
That's a very good point.
So I do think that we all at least get to hold the title of self-learners. At least I would hope so.
I hadn't really considered that, and I definitely want to echo that we'll get into what we feel you can do to be most successful in a boot camp, because we have that as our experience. But reinforcing concepts, hearing it from a different mentor, educator, designer, and having comparisons between the two perspectives, and taking what you want from others and leaving some behind in some cases. But yeah, being a self-learner is huge. That's what is expected in industry too.
Yeah, and I can't speak too much about the 4-year undergraduate path. I know that there's also some 1-year postgraduate options as well for it. I can't speak to that because that hasn't been my experience within UX design, but happy to link in the show notes some examples from others who have taken that path. But I know that, Mel, you have a formal background in graphic design and illustration from OCAD. So you did have a little bit of the academic background in terms of color theory and visual laws that would have helped, at least in some degree, as well as helped you prep. So if you can kind of speak to, I guess, some of the pros and cons of how that type of learning can help on your journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied illustration for my undergrad. Well, honestly, from my own experience, I've been messing around with color and shapes and forms for 4 years. So naturally, I feel more comfortable working with the visual part of UX design, the visual design, and the UI part of it. And also, since I work as a graphic designer after graduation, so in some way, I'm more familiar with the concepts of design system, of typography, color theory, of leading, kerning, things like that. It's definitely a powerful asset when it comes to do UX design. I would say the formal education on the visual design part is definitely something I find super valuable, something I could take into UX. And other than that, because I didn't really have any formal education in UX before my bootcamp experience, so I'm actually relatively new to this realm before the bootcamp started. But I did prepare for that, though, because I know it's a new realm, it's a new industry. So I did a Google certificate on UX design, right before the bootcamp, which I find super helpful, and I get to know the fundamentals of a lot of UX concepts and everything in it. I was super prepared when the bootcamp started, which I actually huge recommend for all the self-learning designers out there to check it out.
Definitely. And I definitely want to jump back to that later in the episode when we go into more details on how we would suggest you prep for your journey in bootcamp if that happens to be the path that you choose. Full disclosure, we do not want to let you guys believe that we have all the answers here or that we know the ultimate best journey for you. We just want to ensure that we're sharing our experiences as candidly as possible. We get a lot of questions from emerging designers in our lives who are wondering about taking the path. And I know we had a lot of questions ourselves when we were entering that world. So we know it can just be helpful to sometimes have a fresh perspective, especially from someone who's just coming out of it, who can really speak to the current experience with it. So before we jump into that, we just want to give our listeners a little history of the bootcamp landscape, just so that you understand what we are now entering into today in 2023 with bootcamps. So the UX bootcamp is not a new concept, but it has gained quite a considerable amount of popularity in the last decade. So just to give you a little brief history, UX design really emerged as a profession in the early to mid 2000s as a response to a lot of the innovation that was happening. For example, the first iPhone being announced between 2007 and 2008 was a huge push for the UX profession in the huge need for more app developers and iOS developers and the huge redesign of their design system. And with that, a lot more of this idea that we don't just need to design systems that are nice or look nice or meet all of the expectations of the user, but also that improve their experience and improve their ease of use and ultimately give them a better overall product. So in the decade that followed that launch, particularly between 2012 and 2021, we saw a real proliferation of boot camps and a real popularization of these as a real path for designers to take to go from one industry to another. And we've definitely come a long way since 2012. Just to give you an idea of the cost of bootcamp in 2021, the cost of BrainStation was around $11,500. And by the time we went to bootcamp, we were entering with a cost of around 17 grand. So naturally, it is a big decision to be making when you're putting down that kind of money, and when we can see clearly a business reason for these boot camps to be marketing towards their students, we also just want to ensure that students who are entering into that are having a clear idea of what that means for them and what that journey might look like for them. We now have a market that, as we know, is quite saturated with designers at the moment, and quite saturated with people who have those degrees at the moment, and quite a few people who are not working necessarily in the UX role. I can speak for myself that I'm heavily underemployed right now. Fortunately for me, I was able to maintain a job after the boot camp, but I'm still looking to develop into a full UX role. So I'm definitely still on that journey myself. So I do want the listeners to know exactly where we are on our journey as well.
Yeah, and for myself, I am fortunate enough to have finished the program and started almost immediately at a role that is unrelated to UX, but at a startup. And I am assisting with engineering and assembly of hardware for a UX research company. So I'm pretty excited at that opportunity because there's been a big learning curve of working in that environment. And I feel like that's adding to my experience post bootcamp, but is a pretty soft transition for me. I have been using tools for the last 10 years, and to continue that, I'm actually able to lend a lot of useful perspectives to prototyping. But again, everyone that I work with at this startup knows that I am looking for a role in UX, and they're supportive and happy for me to move on when I'm ready. So yeah, I make up some of that employable, group after the graduation. And, these boot camps do claim a really high employment rate, and we'll get to that in a bit. But technically I make up some of that employed percentage of our cohort. And Mel?
I'm the only unemployed designer in the room right now. So I've been actively looking for opportunity in UX or product or even visual design after graduating the bootcamp. But we all know it's not that easy to land a job in the current situation where there's a hiring freeze in the industry and the market is fairly saturated. But there's always a way to break through it. There's always a way to stand out. And I guess that's why we're having this podcast, to share our own experience and to share our journey on it with our listeners.
Yeah, and I'm so happy you situated us there, Mel. I do think it's really important to remember the time that we are in right now. We know that this is definitely unprecedented times, to borrow the least precedented word, or the most precedented word at the planet at this point. We do need to acknowledge, of course, the time that we came out of this boot camp was December of 2022 during the holiday season, when we all rightfully took a nice break, knowing full well that no hiring was going to happen over the course of that couple of weeks there in the holidays, and then to enter into 2023, quite a few industries are under a hiring freeze. So that is good to situate that, to say that that is something that we are going to keep in mind while we leverage our experiences with this UX design bootcamp as well, and to understand that context while we let you know our experience as well.
Yeah, and for context, like, we're 2/3 through the bootcamp, and we were seeing headlines of layoffs in tech in the tens of thousands in the US. And for any listeners that are global, Canada and the US are very linked in our economies. And if it's happening in the US, it feels like it's happening here just as much. Yeah, so it's pretty hard to have like that morale hit when we're at our lowest in terms of like energy, and we're trying to maintain optimism. But I feel like the three of us have had a shift of perspective, and it is to an optimistic point. And I'm seeing, hiring starting to happen at places like Google as of this last week, which is a great sign. FANG companies are a thing we'll probably talk about in another episode. But for those that don't know, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, those are kind of most people's like big aspirational companies to work for in the tech or design world. And they are kind of that marker of like what the industry is doing, how it's, if it's healthy, if it's not. And to see that shift at a place like Google is great to see. But the world does need more designers. So I think it's just placing us. I think that that's what we're doing right now and what we're struggling with as a economy, a workforce. And I have every faith that design is more and more valued as we progress through its history of UX.
Totally. I don't think that the need is going anywhere. And before we get too ahead of ourselves, I'm definitely happy to circle back to that. But let our listeners know, how did we all come to, obviously we're all in the same room together. We all went to the same boot camp. So how did we all come to make that decision in the first place? Mel, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, it was a long story. I'll keep it short. I was actually recommended by a fellow designer friend who also went to the same university as I did and ended up being a graphic designer. And we met in the same company, and she was asking me, do you have any plans for your future career development? I was kind of confused at that time because I know I cannot work in graphic design forever, but I wasn't sure where I should go. So she recommended me to look into UI UX, and she recommended me to look into bootcamps because that's the fastest way to really break into this industry. And that's what I did. I listened to her. I did a bunch of research. I did the Google design certificate, and I chose Brain Station to do a bootcamp. and that's where I met Meg and Kim. The reason why I chose BrainStation is actually based off my research, because they're one of those big names out there for UX bootcamps. And also, while I was deciding between BrainStation and another also really well-known bootcamp, the other one only offers online courses at the time I was getting to the bootcamp. So I chose BrainStation because it has in-person class, and also I live close to BrainStation, and that's why I chose it. How about you two?
Cam, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So a career transition is where most of these, fellow designers found themselves, as well as likely many of you listeners will. I'm a little bit older than both Meg and Mel and most of the cohort. I think I was, in the last maybe top 3 or 4 oldest people in the program. Not ever, but certainly in our cohort. I'm in my early 30s. So I was looking at my options for a new career, and I didn't want to be exiting a program and starting a new career in my mid 30s. I wanted it to be in my early 30s. It's never too late to pivot, and I have heard of and seen much older people than in their 30s pivot. I believe there was somebody in their late 40s, early 50s in the cohort before us, and you can bring any of your previous experience and hit the ground running and learn this craft. But I decided to dig into what it would be like to work in tech, because I found that, my experience with, friends or just people in my network that worked in tech, they seem to have a good quality of life and work-life balance. I know a lot of them work very hard too, which I like. I spoke with my good friend and mentor, and he is a senior UX designer. I got to understand better what the job was. I had done some research before I had that conversation, and it seemed like a great option for me. Okay, so what did he do? He was self-taught, pivoted as a graphic designer, and then he was very open about, this is what I did, this is what worked for me given my experience. But for you, he recommended doing a boot camp. So he had known a couple junior designers to have done different boot camps, but he recommended BrainStation quite highly. I didn't just take his word for it. I did a lot of research to determine that that was the best option for me. It was a combination of cost, even though the cost was among the highest, or the highest, I can't really remember. The start date, the commitment, and a number of other things that kind of contributed was the experience of being in person, much like Mel said. I really think that serves my learning style really well. And I think that being on campus was something that would help me take that really seriously. And then I listened to a lot of people speak about their experience at BrainStation, and one of the notes I heard was one of the previously graduated cohorts, they decided one of their goals was to work in the US, and it is a program that has US campuses. So they are recognized, at least in some places in the US, by some employers as a reputable source of that education and that foundation. So I don't necessarily feel that is the only way forward for me in my career, but I don't want to not have that as an option. So moving to the US and working there for even a few years would be a very interesting opportunity that I wouldn't discount. So that's part of how I made my decision. And, spoiler, I think that I had a good time. It was a good education. I don't regret it. But what about you, Meg?
So, similar story. It also was recommended to me from a friend. In early 2021 was when I first started talking to my friend about that as a possibility. I had a lot of friends in tech, so it was always an industry that had really appealed to me, and that I thought a lot of the minds in there. I had a lot of friends in the community, and I found we were very like-minded. We enjoyed talking about a lot of the emerging technologies, about the exciting things that were happening in the world as a result of that. So I had this deep interest in getting into that industry, but not really understanding where exactly I fit within that industry. I considered potentially doing web development. I know, imagine me a developer. I also thought about data science, but so happy I didn't do that. I still don't understand a single one of those languages. And then it was also a combination of the opportunities I found when I was working at Lululemon and being in the room with designers and realizing that that was who I wanted to be in a room. So that was how I came to UX design, but to Brain Station specifically, it was because of my friend that I really looked there. He spoke really highly of his time there and his experience and did warn me about how intense it was going to be, but I think part of me also saw that as a challenge, and so I was also kind of like, bring it on.
Yeah, I think that that's something that can't be understated. The amount of work that you're signing up for is legitimately intense. One of the things that was advertised to at least myself by the recruiter was you can expect 40 hours in class and 30 hours of homework a week, and to kind of give the people close to you in your life a heads up that you're doing this, and to maybe say, I'll see you in 12 weeks. And I think that my experience was sometimes I did 30 hours of homework in a weekend.
Yeah, I was going to say that's equating to about 70, but I got the 60 to 80 hour quote. So I think that is pretty realistic based off of the experience that it absolutely was close to 60 to 80 weekly.
Absolutely agree. I was trying to remember like how many late nights conversations we've had with each other. Like almost every day I can see everyone's Slack account is active, like, maybe 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. at night.
Oh, let's be realistic. It's like 1 a.m.
Yeah, 1 a.m. Let's be realistic. Yeah, like also like see the cursors in Figma. Everyone's there. Like it's almost like we don't have to speak. We all know everyone's like really putting the hard work out there. We're really trying our best.
Definitely. I don't want us to get too deep into this. We definitely will be exploring that topic a little bit more. But before we dive into maybe some of the things to keep in mind about the hard parts of boot camp, I'd love for you both to give me some of the good. We're going to really dive into the good, the bad, the ugly with boot camps. So let's start with the good. Show us how green the grass could be.
Yeah. So if you're fortunate enough to live near a campus, being in person and starting to build your network, your cohort, your classmates, they are the first kind of, seeds you get to plant as a designer and building your career. And that is huge. The other thing that being in person, if you're deciding to be online and in person, and it's maybe an option for either, you get to meet people in the other cohorts. For context, at Brain Station in Toronto, at least, there is a data science and a web development program. And actually, I believe the web development program is now actually positioned more as a general development, because I think they actually graduate with software now, which is huge. Mm-hmm. I know some of our, developers that graduated the same timeline as us are a little bit sour about that, but rightfully. So I think that the good is the in-class and daily experience. I can't imagine doing it from home. That would have killed me. I think the good would be the in-person for me. There's many others, but I'll leave it to Meg and Mel.
Yeah, I agree. Like definitely in-person experience is a huge thing for me as well. And I want to also add like how I personally feel another good thing I feel about Brain Station is the Career Accelerator Program. Because a little bit different from Kim and Megan, I have limited work experience before the bootcamp. So for me, like how to networking, how to build a really polished LinkedIn profile, how to really, construct a good resume are still a bit of new and challenging for me before the bootcamp. And those are the things I learned during the bootcamp, how to present myself to the workplace, how to act professional, how to, speak up for myself in a work situation. And definitely I learned a lot through BrainStation, not only from the Career Accelerator programs consultants and also from my peers, from Megan and Cameron and many other people like I've been talking to. I learned a lot from everyone. And yeah, that's for me. What about you, Megan?
So I think to piggyback off of both of what you just said, that in person was so vital for me. That was actually one of the things that held me back from taking BrainStation for a long time, was that one, the fear of the bootcamp going back from in person to online, just with a single wave of the pandemic coming back, because I had put off the program for so long, because that was one of my fears. Because I knew for myself, in person was absolutely vital for my success. And for me, the best part of the in-person experience, other than my fantastic peers to collaborate with, was also the access to the instructors that we had. At any point in the day, whether it was in a lecture or during an open studio, we could just go and have a chat with them about the work that we're working on, get their feedback in the moment, be able to go back and forth, ask questions, and just to have access to instructors like that are able to help you build your confidence as a new designer who is learning a lot of these processes fresh, and to be able to kind of get gut check every now and again just to see, am I on the right path? Does this seem like a good design decision? Or is there something I'm missing here? Because our eyes obviously aren't as trained as someone who's had dozens of years of experience in the industry. So sometimes I would take my design back to our lead educator, and she would take one look at it and be like, wait a minute, what about that? And it would be just such a simple fix from that point, and it made the design so much better. Not to say that that wouldn't have been available had I done it online, but I guess the ability to build a relationship in person for myself, is a lot easier, especially when it comes to those feedback conversations, because I can, again, just walk over with my laptop instead of having to build up the courage to, send my design blankly to someone and say, can you give me feedback on this? I think that was really, really helpful, because now I also have more confidence that I can do that a little bit later on.
Yeah, totally. And I think that the access to your cohort is just as valuable in the same way for feedback.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like the amount of times that and this is something that you notice pretty quickly, it's a non-competitive atmosphere. It is collaborative. Like the shared success of everyone in this program getting through it together was fantastic, and why I think we are such good friends. Mm-hmm. And the amount of times that I would be like, guys, I figured out how to do pull down menus in Figma, and I just was so quick to be like, anybody need help with that? Like, I will show you. I spent many hours, many YouTube videos figuring out how to do this efficiently, and I was so proud to also share that. And then I had that come back to me in so many other ways. We all kind of sat in a similar part of the room. I surrounded myself by very talented people, and that was no mistake. Everyone in my program was honestly talented as hell in different ways, and that's why you're best served to get to know everybody. But the access to your cohort, the access to your educators is unparalleled. That is such a huge advantage. And one of our cohort, he actually is from the GTA, for those that don't know, Greater Toronto area originally, but had been living on the West Coast and moved back in with his parents so that he could prioritize being in person. Like, that is how important some of us perceive that to be. And, you know, he was on the other side of the country from his girlfriend and still knew that that was the right decision and, you know, had the support from them. And that is huge. Obviously, you need the support of everyone in your network and in your life to go
Shout
and
out
do
Ryan.
this. Yes, Ryan Dyson. Hire this man. He is talented as hell. But yeah, I think that the access to your educators and your cohort is just can't be understated.
Yeah, and just access in general. And I mean, what you just shared there about the skill sharing that happens in those classrooms, every single time someone found a new resource, a new plugin, a new template, a new guide, a new tool that we could use, it would be just as easily shared. It was really one of my favorite environments to ever work in. Honestly, the collaboration was unparalleled in that classroom, and an energy that I've never had with another learning journey. I think it's also because of how intimate it was, which was another great thing for me. We, to put into perspective, we started the boot camp with about 20 of us. We finished with about 15 of us. Both ends of that, still quite a small classroom size. So it was easy to know every single person in the room. And I think that also speaks to why we were so comfortable and eager to help each other. And we didn't see each other, again, like you said, as competition, but it was about how we could lift each other up and help each other. And again, just the energy.
Yeah, it feels like we've already started our own UX community, our own tiny community. And that's really great.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, like that, not to downplay also, I guess we've been going on and on about how great all of that aspect of the bootcamp was for learning, but also for emotional support. We often joke about being trauma bonded over the boot camp. But no, it's an intense program, and to have other people go through that experience with you that you can lean on and, you know, just share. It's been a hard week. I haven't slept much this week. I haven't gotten to see my friends, my family in a little while. Like, thank God I have you guys.
Yeah, the amount of times that I would show up on a Monday morning after we had all been up all weekend. And for context, like, most of our projects were to be submitted online at midnight on Sunday nights. So the amount of times that I had to submit something like down to the wire, like 11:59, no joke, more than once.
No shame.
You lose that track of that time once and you're panicking, and trust me, you'll do it once and you won't do it yourself if you can help it after that. But I think it didn't matter how strong a student you were, it was a ringer. You put yourself through every single week. And I'd come in on Monday, Ryan and Meg were usually first in, and they were sitting on these couches, and it was just like wide-eyed. That was a crazy deadline. Oh my God. And then we got to do it all over again this week.
I used to joke, I had a running bit that I played with myself, that I would come in on Monday and be like, hey guys, I need a weekend to my weekend. I think I said that collectively every week. I apologize to every one of my cohort who had to hear me make that terrible joke over and over again, but I also thank you for humoring me.
Don't be sorry, that's our Monday routine now.
So that is kind of like our shared perspective on the good, but I think there's a lot more to the good. Mm-hmm. I kind of wanted to talk about the holistic approach to UX and UI that we got, because we had two really complementary, really talented educators, mm-hmm. Adrian Pfeiffer and Anne Marie. Sebastian, yes. I couldn't remember her name.
Don't worry, I'll never forget.
Yes. I mean, I think all three of us and everyone from the program think the world of both of them. And I think they had very, very good complementary backgrounds. Anne-Marie is the lead educator for BrainStation's UX program, and I think that extends past just Toronto. Like, it's for the whole organization.
I believe you are correct in that, but not to discount even who she is outside of BrainStation, because she's also a brilliant design consultant.
Yes.
Consulted with many companies, and yeah, her knowledge is felt the minute she steps into the room. But this is not a Anne-Marie fan episode. If you want another one of those, let me know, but
it's very easy to think very highly of her. She's very respectful. Her feedback is like very direct and concise. She's very articulate. Again, the fan episode comes later, but I think that my point was more that we got a very holistic approach to UX. Like, we didn't jump right into UI. They had us do a lot of research, a lot of building the principles up so that we understood when we did get to UI that it was actually like we could justify our design decisions, which is what you were going to need to do in industry. And I really appreciated that. One of the criticisms that I heard but when I was making the decision was that it's a very dogmatic approach to process. But I think that that's true of any education. Like, you're going to learn one way that is repeatable across a general population of this is how to do this.
Well, let's give our listeners some context on what that looked like. I guess that dogmatic approach, quote unquote, like what that looked like for us. So when we started the boot camp, it's, to put in a frame of reference, it's 12 weeks long, intensive. Yep. You are there Monday to Friday every day, 9:30 to 5:30, though it's flexible. You would have some open studio hours to work on projects that you're working on. But to just give you all some context into what we're going in, our first 2 weeks are a design sprint that we jump right into with our cohort, very, very little knowledge, while we are also learning the fundamentals of design. So we're learning about design thinking, about the design process, about double diamond, all of the good things, while we're also undergoing a practical sprint for the first time with very little background. We are thrust into the deep end and told to collaborate day one. We're also submitting design challenges daily that are giving us ways to practice skills that we're learning at the time too, and that are being demoed to us by educators. And that is just the first 2 weeks. And then you're on campus.
Yeah, it was almost like a mini course in itself, and it kind of had a natural like flow to it, and it was led by 2 online educators that were not our in-person educators, and we were paired with the New York and Vancouver. No, it was just New York and
online.
And our general online cohort. So that was like people from as far as London, England to the West Coast, all the way down to Florida. It was literally the biggest spread of people I could imagine. And that was also really a valuable experience. When we got paired up for our groups, because we did a sprint, as Megan mentioned, we were paired with our cohort, so the people we would be in person with. And I felt that was a good way to do it. And I think a lot of us used the Huddle feature on Slack, which is the namesake of our program. It's a great feature. I think I liked it better than being on video. I think a lot of people through the pandemic are tired of being on Zoom. Maybe that's just me, but...
Well, I won't jump in on the Zoom slander, but again, that's just the first 2 weeks, and then you're on campus. And for the first 3 weeks on campus after that, you're diving into UX research. What does that look like? You're building a product up to the grayscale while you're really building these skills and testing these skills in UX research and understanding what that looks like. Simultaneously, you are working on your capstone, which is your ultimate graduating product that you'll finish with. That will be you're taking a product from end to end, from concept to your MVP in the end. That's always going on in the background, and you have to propose that by week 3, I think. So, and that's just the first 5 weeks, and then you're jumping into another project after that where you are looking at how to build flows on web, and you're looking at how to do a heuristic evaluation after that. And you're looking at how to do usability testing. You're looking at how to bring your product after that to hi-fi and apply all the UI to it. And that's happening weekly. And you're getting oftentimes multiple projects that you are balancing at once. That's not to scare you. That's just to say that the learning is definitely very rich. There is not a moment in that program where you are not being taught something while also practicing something else that you're being taught. There was a lot of lecture content that you would receive in the morning, but then also that you would have to apply in the afternoon to a project that you were working on, whether that was just a daily challenge or something for a larger project that you were working on.
Yeah, and the other thing to note, you needed 90% attendance to pass. Mm-hmm. A passing grade in the program is 70%. So there's no slacking. And those 70s, if you got one in the program, you earned it. And I don't think many people got 90s or above. It was hard to get the marks that you needed to pass. Not impossible at all. The educators were super supportive, but they do not hand out 90s very easily. So if you got one, you earned every bit of that.
Don't look at me like that. Yeah, no, definitely. I would agree that they definitely help you show where all the opportunities are too, which again, it was really nice to have access to that, but also not to undersell how much work you leave the program with too. You are completing 6 full projects throughout this entire thing. You're doing, and some of those are collaborative and give you a chance to work again with other designers, and some of those are individual where you really are put to the test to where when no one is coming and doing the work for you. If you thought that you were going to be able to get through the program with group assignments and being the least contributing member, good luck when it comes to those individual assignments. And those 6 projects are just within the actual course itself. You also have your hackathon, which is like your 7th undefined project that really gives you a chance to collaborate with cross-functional teams. You got to work with the developers, you got to work with your data scientist to solve an actual industry problem. We'll dive into that a little bit more in a bit, but I do think that ultimately the amount of work that you get to leave with is also something that is super valuable with the program as well. It's very practical. It's very hands-on. It's not theoretical. You are giving problems and you're able to solve them, which is nice to know. You leave the program knowing exactly what it is a UX designer does on the job, which is not necessarily something that I can always attribute to my undergraduate degree, where a lot of it could be a lot more theoretical.
Yeah, and the other thing to note is there was never a test. It was always a deliverable that was submitted, and so you're never having to deal with that test pressure, which is my experience kind of through high school. I hated that part of it. I did not perform well in those scenarios. So the fact that you could just apply the effort and time at your own pace, take a break, come back to it, which is how you should work. It worked really well for me. I think that like learning style is like a really important thing to note, is you're not being tested on the difference between like a typeface and a font. I think that was one of the examples they joked about. Like no one in industry is going to like pick that apart either. You should know the difference, but you know.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I know, Mel, that was one of your big successes from the bootcamp was the access we had to career development as well. For myself, the hackathon was that, because it was an opportunity to work with someone in industry, and we were able to deliver our projects to industry professionals. And fortunately for us, all of the panel were UX designers, so we actually got to hear precisely what was strong about the UX of our hackathons and what might have been an opportunity, which invaluable. I think that personally for myself, that was one of the most valuable experiences that came from the bootcamp, and something I'm definitely also thinking of outside the bootcamp as well is engaging in more hackathons, because I think that opportunity to really work with developers particularly is something that is so prevalent on the job for designers that I actually wish we got a little bit more of in the bootcamp, which is actually, I'm going to jump off of that to say that for my bad for boot camps, I personally wish there was more opportunities for us to collaborate, particularly with developers, and to work alongside them, because I think that would have been really valuable for us to leave the boot camp with an understanding of what a working relationship with a developer would be, which is also why I've taken that into my hands myself since the boot camp to start a project with one of the developers that we left boot camp with, so that I would be able to really grow my skills in that area, because I've heard from senior designers as well how important it is to understand what that working relationship looks like and how to, optimize it.
Yeah, you definitely have to communicate with them and respect them. There's a lot of different kind of stereotypes about designers as much as developers. I'm not here to say which is true and what's not, but I think that understanding that you're working with a human being that also has probably things from other projects on their plate in some cases, or like if you're going to be applying for a UX job at a company that doesn't have any UX designers yet, you're literally appealing to the, sensibilities and personalities of engineers and designers. Like, you need to learn how to talk to them. So I do wish there was more cross collaboration as well. I feel like working in teams and actually incorporating aspects of agile would have been a really big thing that could have been capitalized on, because that is actually part of the development program. They actually did use the sprint format every single week. And it was explained to them properly that it was the agile kind of, structure that they were using. Yeah. So I do think that also makes my bad list. I think that the way in which boot camps have both a pro and a con is it's ever evolving, so they can make changes. And I'm sure that's something that they will incorporate sooner than later if they have to. It's the standard. But, there were opportunities that, they could have done it a little bit more than just the one project. But we still got to do it. It's still better than some programs would be where there's no cross collaboration at all. I'm sure that is still kind of maybe a neutral. Could have been better. It was still something that we valued.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Definitely, I do feel there's a little bit of lack of communication and collaboration between the other cohorts, and which is actually a huge part in the real life work setting where designers have to work with other, cross-functional teams, people from other departments and other industry. And another thing I want to mention, not exactly as bad, but something I found through my bootcamp experience is that how it was marketed as entry-level bootcamp. You don't have to have any previous experience to get into it. But from my own experience, I do find it's actually more beneficial if you come prepared, if you have some previous knowledge already have within this field, whether it's just a bunch of research or a few articles you read on Medium. I would suggest everyone who's considering a bootcamp to come prepared, because that'll make your experience a lot smoother and also make the learning experience a lot easier, instead of trying your best to absorbing everything new within such a short amount of time. And yeah, that's my insights from that.
I definitely think that that's great advice for anyone considering it. I think preparation is never a bad thing. Being proactive is never a bad thing. And maybe even offering that as a way for people to explore the research as well is to maybe try a free certificate, see if you even get like a feel for it, see if you like it, see if this is really for you, and if you and maybe learn, like, dive into some theory ahead of time and see if this is really what you want to be exploring. That being said, I will be transparent in that I didn't do I didn't do any certificates ahead of the bootcamp. I didn't come from zero. I had a pretty good understanding of what user experience design was in the industry from observing other people do it. And I understood the benefits of it. And very slightly, I understood what the process was. But I understood the process from the perspective of a user because I was often in the rooms as a user, and so got to give feedback, got to participate in workshops, and got to participate in discovery, but often did not get to be part of the design process. So yeah, I think that would have been nice and helpful to have ahead of time. But I also think, to give them credit, I think you can. I mean, obviously I'm here. I made it through the boot camp without the prep. You can get through it if you are a figure it out person. Resourcefulness goes a long way in this field, and figuring out how to leverage the tools in front of you, leverage the resources in front of you, and just being willing to be entrepreneurial and just make decisions to figure things out is also going to get you really, really far and is going to carry you through programs like this.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, that covers all of my bads. Did you guys have any other bads?
I think we had talked about some of the other points that I had, and I think that might make the ugly list.
Okay, so let's dive right into the juicy, ugly parts of boot camp. So for me, and this is not to necessarily discredit boot camps whatsoever, but it is to remember that a boot camp is a business. And to remember that the boot camp is marketing themselves to you, and often very aggressively. I think I put my sign up through on BrainStation to get to the portal so that I could understand what the costs would look like and what the commitments would look like and what the program would look like. And within the same day, I got a call from one of the recruiters asking me if I had any questions. And again, that is totally normal business practice, but also at the same time understanding that you might want to do research outside of those conversations with the marketing team, because again, that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to market to you. They're trying to sell you this boot camp. And so take what they say with a grain of salt and do your own research as well.
100%. I totally agree with that. Actually, speaking with someone that has done the program was massive. They didn't oversell it to me. It was just a proof of concept, basically. It's like, you did this program. I'm sure it's improved since then, but they have a job. And that is enough proof that this is possible. And that example was important to me because that person didn't have like a background in tech or any design experience as well. I didn't interject, but I also didn't do a prep course. I wouldn't say I have any design experience, like Canva, some editing software, having produced music. That's about it.
If we're counting Canva, then everyone's a designer.
Isn't that their slogan? Yeah, and I think that experience would have been nice, and the learning curve is there. All the same, like, you do need to work really hard any way you slice it. I don't think there was a single person in our program that didn't feel they had to work for it. Like, it was all of us. So to get into what I felt is the ugly side of boot camp, life outside the boot camp does not stop. I picked September start because I felt it was kind of symbolic of like a new beginning. A lot of people are going back to school. So I felt like I could kind of lump myself in with that kind of crowd. I have some friends that are in university. So that felt like, you know, I'm with them doing that from my like previous circle of friends or network. I didn't want to do it during the summer where I would be tempted by social invites and things like that. I also didn't want to do it in this time of year. We're in, you know, kind of February, March time of the year. And being someone that experiences seasonal depression, I did not want to fight those demons on top of like lack of sleep and all of this on my plate. I have 2 dogs. I have a wonderful girlfriend. We live together. So all of my responsibilities did not stop. I did my best to balance everything. I think I was successful most weeks, and I don't think I was alone in feeling like I could have been doing a better job at any number of things, the balls in the air that I was juggling. So it was really hard for me to feel like I was maybe neglecting a responsibility or not as good as I could be in certain areas, whether that was the project I was working on, maybe having to put it to the side because I had other responsibilities and then feeling pressed for time near the end. Dealing with the stress of everything, it's just tough. I don't think anybody that went through the program didn't have their own kind of balls in the air to juggle or personal struggle that maybe happened during the program. So I think that would be my ugly. It's not insurmountable. I think people have had more difficult challenges than me. Doesn't take away from the fact that I experienced that. And I definitely think anybody can do it, but sometimes life gets in the way. And BrainStation was pretty understanding. I won't name names, but some people had to leave our program, and they worked with the staff to take another run at it. And I think that they understand that you're a human being. And I feel like that support doesn't come in the form of like direct mental health support, but they do know that you're a human being, not just an account with you as a business. So I did appreciate that there was humility extended to me in moments where, you know, like I was late on something because I couldn't compress a file enough, and I still did all the work, and I wasn't docked that late mark that one time because it was my kind of first time experiencing that. They could see that I had submitted most of my file, but not the actual like compressed attached file. So I think that, you know, that's my ugly, but it comes with a lot of footnotes that I think, you know, again, the staff were very understanding.
I mean, no doubt. It was definitely a grueling 3 months and very much did have to put life outside of it on pause.
Yeah, I remember like we were being told when the bootcamp started, say goodbye to your life, to your social life for 3 months, say goodbye to your family, your friends for 3 months. And that was true. That was totally true. I can prove that. For me, the ugly part is actually not about the system or the people we met at the bootcamp, but it's more about of a state of mind that, in general speaking, a lot of people when attending the bootcamp, we tend to think about, oh, this bootcamp is gonna lead me to a job. I'm gonna get hired like right after the graduation. But the truth is, you're not.
Yeah.
I mean, for most of the cases, you're not.
Or it's just more, I guess, again, to resituate that with my point, when we were marketed the boot camp, you do get very attractive hiring rates. The BrainStation does self-report, might I add, that they have a 90% hiring success rate within 6 months. Of course, that's attractive to anyone who will see that. But again, it's good to keep in mind what that data means and what that data doesn't mean. So that data, again, is self-reported. So we don't have all the context around that. We don't have, like Cam mentioned, he's part of that 90%. I'm part of that 90% because we are hired, but not directly within role. And that's the thing about it. But it's also, again, understanding that we have to take that with a grain of salt. And then it's also situating and understanding that BrainStation doesn't have control on the world around them.
Absolutely.
So they get to have those success rates, but past success does not mean future success.
There's always condition on those data.
Yeah, and they don't have necessarily the foresight to say that a global pandemic will happen and, you know, a war will happen and a recession will happen and layoffs will happen. And, like, of course, those are inevitables, but again, it's just putting everything within a greater frame of reference and understanding that I do definitely agree that that's probably one of the ugly sides of boot camps, but also having our own personal responsibility to understand how we can navigate the world around that as well.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Like, boot camps are not a guarantee to a job offer, but it's more of a stepping stone, a ticket to a new career, to a new beginning. And we're all here. We're all on this journey together.
An educational path.
Definitely.
I was going to say, I think the only guarantee of bootcamp is that you'll have access to a well-rounded syllabus.
Yeah.
I think that's the only guarantee. And it is what you make it. I think that there was many conversations that I had informally with our educators that I saw people going out on lunch and I stayed to ask them a follow-up question. And some of those conversations with our educators were like almost more valuable than the lessons that we got. That being said, like, I think I missed half a day, the whole program. I couldn't imagine missing more than a day, the whole program. Every single day was jam-packed with like very relevant, useful information that it was iterative. So you missed Monday, Tuesday, you're going to be way behind or out of the loop on Wednesday. It is so important to just
I was
there.
even scared of sometimes going to the bathroom in the middle of class. I was scared of missing 5 minutes.
Yes.
Sometimes the hot tips that they drop on us in 1 second that would change everything.
Yep. And scraping the Slack once the program was done of all of the resources that went in there. All the UX toolkit channel was very, very good, rich with information.
Yeah. So I think let's each go through and sum up what was our experience overall with the boot camp. How are we leaving feeling it?
So for myself, I feel like what we're talking about is a transition in career. I feel like going there, being there in person, also spending the money, like it made me take it seriously and it made me feel like I'm not just deciding I'm calling myself a UX designer. There's some credibility there. And I think that helped me make that transition feel real and valid. So we would like to do an episode about imposter syndrome. But I feel that helped me shed a lot of that. And I feel that my experience overall was pretty positive. It's $17,000 Canadian. It's a lot of money. You pair that with a MacBook, you're in and around that $20,000 mark, let alone paying rent, feeding yourself, and just being alive in 2022 or 2023. It's expensive. Life is very expensive now. And it's no insignificant cost, but I think the quality of the experience, the education, the access was up there. I think that I would say to anyone, if you're willing to work hard and you're going to commit and you're serious about it, it's a good experience.
So you'd recommend it?
I would recommend the bootcamp experience. I think that BrainStation is a very good option. I don't doubt that there's very talented educators and great, organizations that put together a good program other than BrainStation. But I think that we both feel, or we all feel, that BrainStation was, again, maybe I shouldn't speak for you guys, but for me, I feel like when I walk back in that building for like a seminar or something like that, I feel like I accomplished something of note and that I feel kind of like at home there. And I feel that that starts to feel like a community once you graduate, especially while you're there. But, you know, coming back there, I feel good. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely, I'm not regretting it. I also have like 70-80% of positive experience with the bootcamp. I would definitely recommend it for those who are like me, don't have any real life work experience, to give bootcamp a try, because that's one of the fastest way to get into an industry, like to break into UX. Personally speaking, my bootcamp experience, it's really good, like on the personal level, because I made so many friends, which are the most valuable thing I had. And also for me, it's like an immersive learning experience. By that, I mean not only learning the technical things about UX, the professional development things about like the career, but also like I literally feel like I've been learning a lot from the people around me every day. How to, how to communicate, how to problem solve, how to be accountable. Like, I learned a lot throughout that 3 months. So for me, it's definitely a valuable investment I did for myself last year. And I would recommend it to those who would want to feel the same and who can bear the super tensed curriculum. Yeah. How about you, Megan?
So I agree. I definitely don't want to undersell the amount of knowledge you'll leave there with. And I do think that you summed it up best when you said it's a stepping stone. I think that anyone who treats bootcamp as a tool in their journey, as a way for you to soak up as much knowledge, make as many connections as possible, have as many collaborative sessions with other designers and other developers as possible, I think that you'll really, really gain some valuable experience if you do that. So that being said, it might be a bit of a cop-out, but I'm going to say that I recommend it for those who are looking for that experience and who are looking for that stepping stone and who really value that in-person, intimate classroom setting as an educational platform to learn. I think that, yeah, if you feel set up and connected enough to self-teach yourself all of that, all the power to you. But I definitely think that the structure, the path, and the access that I got from bootcamp was enough for me to justify the investment. And I'm really happy with the direction that it's given me on my post-bootcamp journey. And I feel like every bit of foundation I took from that bootcamp has helped me exponentially in discovering new design books, new design tools, has helped me in networking, has helped me in presenting and communicating my design decisions, has given me the confidence to reach out to people for feedback, to, really give me the confidence as a designer to feel set up on my journey. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, I'd recommend it. If not, good luck on a different path and journey.
Yeah, I think to your point, like there are other ways to do it. And some people just consume everything there is to know on a subject and just soak it up. I think you need to do that regardless. But you could be self-taught and still be a talented designer. I don't think that there is any right or wrong way to do it. And I think, to your point, Megan, like if you value those other things that we said that are kind of outside of the like syllabus and curriculum, it's, do you want to network? Do you want to leverage the career advancement and support that BrainStation offers? And I think probably most, boot camps offer something like that. If that sounds good to you, I think we would all recommend that. So now that you kind of have heard our endorsement, we wanted to give some tips that maybe we would have given ourselves at the beginning of the program with how to be successful. So I had talked about kind of expectations, time commitment. They will hit you with that. But I had my expectations set really low for how much free time I was going to have. And I'm glad I did. Expectations are something that, you can set as a goal, but it can also be something that is something that you have to be disappointed when it's not the way you expected. So I think that was important for me to have that perspective going in, knowing that it's going to be a lot of work, and anything that I get is time to myself or time to see family or do something that is self-care would just be a bonus. I didn't feel entitled to any of that time. What do you guys think would be most helpful to ensure that success during the program?
Something that I had come to learn later down the line in boot camp was to bring your early versions of your design to your instructor. This will save you hours of your life to have early feedback on your designs to make sure you are going down the right path. And this goes for anyone inside, outside boot camp. This is just my biggest advice to any junior designer is don't wait till 100% done
Not even 50.
Not even 50.
20 or 30.
Bring your quick sketches, bring your wireframes. Don't skip the easy steps of the process that are there in place to save you time and energy down the line. Because if you bring that design that you sunk dozens of hours, maybe more than that, to your instructor, just for them to turn around and say, hey, Kim, why don't you give us an example of this, actually?
Oh, yeah. I got one for you guys. Okay, so this is working on my capstone, and we were starting to transition from mid-fidelity to high fidelity, so that looked like color injection. So they had us build the mood boards. We're going through all this, these steps that are very helpful, and I totally now see how awesome mood boards can be. I did not enjoy them when we did them in the program, but they have value. So I developed kind of several different colors that I wanted to work with. I had shown them to our TA, Michelle. Shout out to Michelle. She was wonderful. As well as our lead educator, Anne-Marie. So I started injecting the colors from my kind of like example that I did, maybe 10 or 12 different like iterative kind of examples of working within that color spectrum. And I started injecting it, and I was like, this looks like just garbage. I couldn't get past it. And I was like, I pared it back. I went monochromatic because I felt, that's going to be pretty safe. And then I was like, look, this looks too intense. These colors just are not working for me. What do I need to do? And I should have shown low fidelity, not even mid fidelity, to Anne-Marie. That would have been like 2, maybe 3 weeks before that. I mean, I had feedback, but I should have brought it to her and gotten her 2 cents on just the way in which I had structured my whole product. She looked at the first impression, which is the homepage of my product. It's called Wheelbase. And she looked at it and said, why are there so many options here? This doesn't make any sense. Why am I being shown this? And she was very nice about it. I'm making it sound very curt and blunt, which she was direct. And she opened her phone. She said, look at Uber. where do you go? Where are you going to? It's the first thing you see. You punch it in, and then gives you like 3 or 4 steps. What's the quickest path to the goal of the user?
Steve Krupke, don't make me think.
Exactly. And these are just like principles that are no mistake that the most successful apps have. Like, do you think you need to log into an app that you're using every day, like Instagram? You leave it logged in. Do you need to click a button that says feed? No, you're shown your feed right away. All of these things are as simple and as few steps to the end goal. And she just opened my eyes to that completely. And it introduced hours more of work. And I think I was on my 3rd or 4th version of the homepage at that point. And it was extremely valuable to me, but you get burned once on that. You're going to bring your designs to someone senior to you or another fellow designer or a mentor. Bring it to them early and show them what you're thinking. And if it doesn't make sense to somebody that speaks your language, i.e. design, you either need to develop a better way of communicating that design or there's something wrong. You should have maybe done 2 or 3 versions of that screen. And to Adrian's point, he kind of laughed about it a bunch of times. Like, you guys really don't like doing sketches, hey? And I started to do a lot more sketches. And sometimes I would be doing them to humor him because that was the requirement for the project. But I started to see the value. Like, you need to do a lot of versions of something to pull the best ideas out. And you need to combine those ideas. So sometimes you're going to do the crazy 8s and it's going to seem like you've come up with a bunch of nonsense, but then you might pull a really good idea out of that, and that 8 minutes was well worth it. And so it's the time investment early and the feedback and the communication of those designs that is going to save you the time in the long run. And that is, I think, what the value of UX is just taking time to actually think about what you're doing and actually put effort into making sure it is actually the right idea to run with.
Intentionality.
That's right.
Wow. I'm trying to remember the sketches I did throughout the bootcamp. I agree with Kim's opinion on actually Megan's opinion on like,
Both of our opinion. I think we're in agreement.
Opinions. Well, count me in our agreement on reaching out to the educators and mentors or the people who are guiding us throughout the bootcamp. Definitely, it's definitely a huge benefit for those who are looking to a bootcamp to really, get there to get to know your educator, your mentors, and really just work with them to have them give out feedback to you. Actually, that's something I wish I did more while I was in the bootcamp, because I definitely didn't talk as much as I should have to our educators, who are amazing people. And another tips I would give is to always be prepared, especially for like more intense, more like brain station bootcamps, which I've been joking about. It feels like 3 months of final weeks. Definitely come prepared for those. Just do a free certificate online, or maybe just do a few research, download Figma before the bootcamp started, really mess around, having fun, get to know the words, the terms. And by doing that, it's more likely for you to have a smooth learning path along the bootcamp. And a lot of things will come more natural and easier to you, which I think will effectively reduce the amount of overwhelmingness and stress people tend to get from going to a bootcamp.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. I actually don't want to undersell, though, the amount of hard skills that they did teach us. I do think that they did a really good job of giving us the tools to succeed in like Figma and design tools. And I do think that the soft skills are where you really are going to want to come prepped with some soft skills, particularly communication and the ability to articulate how you're designing something and why you're designing something. We something that I wasn't expecting from the boot camp was how many presentations we'd have to do. You have to do, and just to put it in context, you have to do a presentation for every single project that you have. There is not a single project that you are not presenting something. And when you are presenting in your hackathon, your team is going to be heavily relying on you as the UX designer, because in industry, you are often the person who is going to need to articulate what is being designed and why it's being designed that way. And you need to be prepared to speak to that, not only just in a clear presentation, but also in a way that you can engage with stakeholders, with people, and be able to go back and forth and explain things. So I think that if you have an opportunity ahead of going into a boot camp to practice your public speaking, to practice your ability to articulate your decisions, and to be able to communicate effectively why you would choose to do something, that will be invaluable for your experience in boot camp, and especially for your experience after boot camp. It's definitely something I'm still in the process of always developing my skills on. It is one of the key differentiators that I continually hear from senior designers that sets one designer off from another, is the ability to communicate why. The why.
Yeah, agree. I think you're doing a pretty good job public speaking. I love your presentations. But for me, it's so true that I've been really challenging myself and getting out of my comfort zone, especially in public speaking during the 3 months of boot camp. As you can tell, I'm not that good at public speaking. I'm ESL. I kind of feel stressed.
Don't speak for me. I can't tell anything. I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you. But okay, maybe you cannot tell, but I feel so stressed before our presentations during the boot camp. But I can tell myself making progress, little by little. Every time I'm presenting our product, I feel a little bit more. I know I'm making a little bit of progress, and I'm so glad that I did a morning KO with our boot camp. And yeah, I know there's still such a long way for me to go to, be like other senior designers or other designers out there who can really tell the story of their product throughout the presentation. But I know where I'm going. I'm going that direction for sure.
I'm going to link in the show notes, Articulating Design Decisions by Tom Greener. I'm currently reading it, and if I could have read one book ahead of my bootcamp experience, this would have been it.
That's a really good call, because it doesn't really expire. It's not specific to what is being used in industry, being like Figma or anything else. It's just kind of universal in terms of any team you're working in.
Yeah, it's the one part of the industry that is never going to go away.
Well put. To echo the soft skills, I think you found, this was, your words, finding yourself in a room full of empaths. Empathy is one of the things that is often referred to as the primary skill of a UX designer. And I can't echo that enough. The thing is, you can't teach empathy.
No.
You can listen, you can develop listening skills, but do you care about what you're hearing and the feedback you're getting? You should, but you don't always.
Or also, do you truly understand it? Because there's a very big difference between listening to someone's words and then understanding the context around that and what that means. It's the difference between hearing someone's initial phrase and then taking that and breaking down but why is it that way? And then why is it that way? And then why is it that way? I think that's something that we explored when we were reading, what was it? Hooked?
Hooked, yeah. Nur Ayal.
Yeah.
Excellent book. We're in a book club with some of our cohort because extracurriculars are our thing, I think. And he said, or pointed out, that asking why about 5 times in thoughtful ways, not just hitting the user with why, because you might frustrate them, but you can generally have the pain point kind of fall out of that conversation after about 5 whys.
Or even just questioning it yourself and taking the data that you got from those users and saying, okay, well, why is it that? And why is it that? And why is it that? And getting to the root of the context behind the pain point.
I think we all kind of stopped and said, like, this isn't really the subject of this book, but that is an extremely valuable insight. Hooked by NurAL. Excellent book about habit-forming products. Building habit-forming products is the tagline. Yeah, soft skills. To your point about public speaking, I think that's something most people struggle with. I think there's some statistics to support that. That's like the overwhelming majority. Even when you're good at it, it's still something that it takes a long time to get used to that. They do a good job of like giving very constructive feedback on public speaking. I think working in teams and public speaking is something that they can add more to in the program, specifically the team thing. But Anne-Marie and Adrian were excellent at speaking to the class. Body language was a thing that they kind of drilled into us, to not all just stand around the podium but to actually like fill the space in the room. An engaging performance in a lot of ways is what is actually going to be helpful in keeping people's attention and conveying your thoughts. Not to the point where you're distracting, obviously, but it is a huge skill. And that was one of the things that was pointed out very early in my exploration of, do I want to do UX design? You're not just going to be sitting on Figma all day and designing. You're going to be in meetings, and you're going to have to almost schedule the time you're designing within your team. That was one of the things that a senior designer that is one of my mentors says really quick to point out, because I think that can be a rude awakening for a lot of people. But if you like talking to people and you like working in your teams, it's not a bore. Plus, you're dealing with people that are like you, likely. And that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to, is working in a team. I don't want to be just by myself working on the same design. I want to bounce ideas off people. I want to be a collaborator. So I think that's something that you can do your best to bring that for sure. But your recommendation of that book, Articulating Design Decisions, I'm going to buy that literally after we get off the call.
Yeah, and I know that it's something we talked about doing an episode on, and I'm sure we'll be diving deeper into that. Hopefully when we have a clear and, research-backed understanding that we can also speak to, as well as our own experiences with it. Mel, any other tips from you?
Spend more time with your friends and family before the bootcamp started, because you are going to miss them.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess if there's one final tip I could leave and impart with anyone, is just to remember that it's a stepping stone and not your journey, and that the work absolutely doesn't end when the bootcamp ends, and be ready to keep going. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely.
And done is better than perfect.
And done is absolutely better than perfect. If you won't hear it enough from the bootcamp, you'll hear it from us.
It's 100% the mantra.
Okay. So, in sum, for our listeners, that was the good, the bad, and the ugly for bootcamps. It is not a universal experience of everyone, and there's definitely a million other experiences out there. If you had a different experience, feel free to let us know. Feel free to sound off in the feedback. Let us know if your experience was different, if your experience was better, was worse, if you have a different good, bad, ugly. If you didn't go to a boot camp and you went to something else, let us know what your experience was with that. We'd love to hear it.
Or if you are considering boot camps and we didn't answer one of your questions, please feel free to reach out. We want to be building a community around this podcast, and we would love to hear from you.
All right. Well, that is it for us today. Thank you for joining us. This has been The Huddle.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Huddle. We appreciate your support and hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to watch along, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. If you're feeling generous, please leave us a review and rating on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us improve our content and reach more people. Until next time, keep learning, growing, and exploring. Today's show was produced by Meg, Mel, and Cam, with help from Meg, Mel, and Cam. Editing from Cam, music from Half Cool. I'm Meg. Thanks for joining the Huddle.